When you create a formula in Excel, it uses what's called relative cell references. And that means if you move the formula, it's also going to move the cells that that formula refers to. So they'll be in the same place relative to where the formula is. If I copy this formula, which adds cell D3 and E3 together, and I paste it into the cell right below it, and double click it to see, you'll see that it moved the cell references down one row to be in the same place relative to where the formula is. So now we're referring to cell D4 and E4. But what if I actually wanted to add cell D3 and E4? What if I wanted D3 to stay the same no matter where I copied the formula? The way to create an absolute cell reference is you double click the formula to see it, and you type a $ in front of the coordinate that you want to remain the same. In this case, I want the cell D3 to remain the same, so I'm going to put a $ in front of the D and in front of the 3. And let's see what happens now when I copy this formula down. If I double click to see the cells it's referring to, I see that D3 stayed the same while E4 remained a relative reference. It moved. Same here, D3 stayed the same, and now we're down to E5. That cell reference moved. Those $ made this an absolute reference, so no matter where we move this formula, anywhere in the spreadsheet, it's always going to refer to D3, while the E5 remains a relative reference, and if we move this formula around, it's always going to be the cell right next to the one that contains the formula. You can also have just one coordinate be the absolute reference. If I delete the $ in front of the 3, for example, D is going to remain absolute, so whatever cell we're referring to is always going to stay in the D column, but the 3 is going to be relative. So let's see what happens if I copy this formula and move it over here. It kept the first cell reference in column D, but it allowed it to shift down to D4, because D was absolute and 4 was relative. A useful application of these absolute cell references is an example like this. Let's say I want each of these subtotals for each of our categories. I want the amount to appear as the percentage of the grand total. So what percentage of the grand total was car maintenance, for example. So let's start with a formula. I'm going to type in equals here. I'm going to select this cell, which is the subtotal, and I'm going to divide it by the grand total. I'm then going to change my cell format to percentage. So that was 5%. If I copy this formula down, I'm going to get an error message because the cell it's referring to here moved and it's blank because it was a relative reference. So I want to make the cell reference for the grand total absolute. I want to always refer to that cell no matter where I move the formula. So I'm going to type $ in front of the D and the 61, which is the cell coordinate here. Now, if I copy that formula down, you'll see that it still is referring to this grand total cell, which is D61. And I can copy this formula all the way down, and for each of these subtotals, it's going to give me the percentage of the grand total.